Welcome to the first of 3 short presentations, which together cover the route of the Cemetery Railway from Brookwood Station through to South Station. My name is John Clark, and I have been researching and writing on the Cemetery Railway for many years. This first programme covers what you can see at Brookwood Station. And the reason for starting our journey here is that the cemetery branch fed back into the cemetery from behind the down or cemetery side platform. This view shows the station buildings on the down platform. The station didn't exist when the cemetery was opened at the end of 1854. And at that time, there was just the railway connection into the cemetery. And because there was no station or even a village here, it was called Necropolis Junction. This situation lasted for 10 years. The first station did not open until the summer of 1864. It was built largely at the expense of the London Necropolis Company, the original owners of Brookwood Cemetery. The station was opened for the convenience of visitors to the cemetery who could now use ordinary trains operating out of London Waterloo rather than the daily funeral train. They could also choose trains that departed earlier or later than the Necropolis train. Very little is known of the original Brookwood Station, and I have never seen any photographs of it. What we know is taken from early Ordnance Survey maps. These show that there were 2 main lines and 2 platforms. The platforms were connected by a footbridge, and like today, the main station building was on the Brookwood side of the station. Brookwood Station, as it now stands, dates from the very start of the 20th century. At that time, the London and South Western Railway was well into its ambitious project to double the capacity of its main lines all the way to Basingstoke. The section between Woking and Purbright Junction was tackled between 1901 and 1904. The space for the 2 extra railway lines was provided on the cemetery side of the existing main line. This means that the 2 new tracks and the new station building, shown here, were built on land that was previously part of the cemetery. The old footbridge was taken down and a new subway excavated under the main lines. The new building had a generous canopy and a waiting room, which was the last door and window at the right-hand side of the building. This picture is taken from the Up or London platform, which is on the site of the original station, and part of the platform may predate 1900. If we now go down the steps leading to the ticket office area, we can find part of the earlier station building. Walk across the ticket office area to the entrance to the subway and then turn and look up through the glazed roof. There you will see an external wall with the initials L and SWR for the London and South Western Railway and the date 1890. This wall formed what used to be the main entrance to Brookwood Station, so the ticket office area has been altered over the years, since in 1890, where we are standing, would have been open and part of the station forecourt. These changes to the earlier building were associated with the opening of the branch line to Bisley Camp, which opened in 1890. Now let us explore the other platform by entering the subway, from which you will see the entrance into the cemetery straight ahead. When we reach the platform, turn to your left and start walking. You will shortly notice milepost 28. This reminds us that in the early 1850s, it was a bold project indeed to create a large metropolitan cemetery nearly 30 miles from central London. The picture also shows how the station fence moves closer to the platform edge beyond the milepost. The reason for this is that originally the section behind the fence contained a signal box which used to stand on the platform. In addition to managing trains on the main line, it also controlled train movements to and from the cemetery. If we continue to walk further along the platform, you will notice that it has been extended, and this took place in the 1960s, and the difference is shown by the change from the wire fence to the concrete wall panels to your left. And if you look over these concrete wall panels, you will see the area on the edge of the cemetery where the railway fed back from the main line. Notice that the land level is lower than the platform. The cemetery railway was built on a gradually falling gradient from this point and then running back through the cemetery. This now overgrown area supported two railway lines which formed the runaround loop. The loop allowed the engine to uncouple from one end of the funeral train, detach and then run round its train, to be reattached at the other end. The funeral trains were usually operated so that on arrival at Brookwood, the train reversed back behind the station and into the cemetery. On the return journey, this meant the engine was at the front of the train, but this was changed when the train reached the runaround loop prior to its return journey to London. We'll now retrace our steps, walking back along the platform and continuing past the station building. If you now look over the fence here, you will clearly see the route of what was now the single line of the former cemetery railway. In this picture, you can see the railway railings painted black and gold, which form and still form the boundary between the site of the railway, which was almost directly below us, and the cemetery itself, which is behind the railings. And the graves you can see are in part of the new Muslim high ground adjacent to Pine Avenue. Here, the difference in level between the platform and the route of the cemetery railway is much clearer than in my previous picture. And again, from here, the level of the railway continues to fall as it curves away from Brookwood Station. And we will revisit this part of the route in the next programme. We'll now leave the platform and go down the steps and turn right through the gateway and into the cemetery. Immediately to your right, you'll find this track panel. It was donated by Network Rail in 2005 and forms a fitting reminder of the near 90 years the funeral trains operated into and out of Brookwood Cemetery. Our next view takes us beyond the track panel, and you can see how the railway ran behind the station building. Remember that beyond this boundary fence lay the runaround loop that met and merged into a single line, more or less where we are standing on this side of the boundary fence. Notice the height of the station building. The foundations emphasise the difference in levels between the platform, noting the windows in the upper wall, and the route of the cemetery railway before us. And this further view of the station building also shows the difference in levels, because here on the left you can clearly see the bank that forms a foundation for the platform, and below it the level land where the cemetery railway what once ran. So this completes our exploration of Brookwood Station, and I leave you with details of my history of the Cemetery Railway, alongside the self-guided booklet published by the Brookwood Cemetery Society, which allows you to explore this route on your own. And join me in the next programme, where we explore the route of the railway through the North Cemetery down to Cemetery Pales.